morning. Okay, thanks for being here. We do have a deck. It's about 5 pages. I'm going to go through it in about 60 seconds because I honestly don't think you'll learn anything from it that you don't already know. I really find all these presentations to be the exact same. What I thought I'd do instead is kind of just do a Q&A session and maybe talk kind of off the cuff about sort of the real trials and tribulations of a early Florida license holder, and do that kind of with my CFO hat on, and kind of let you all interrupt me and ask any questions that you want to ask. Just sort of given everything that we've been through and where we are today, the benefit of being a private company is that I can kind of talk freely and candidly like this without, it affecting our share price. So. With that said, I'll give a quick introduction on who I am and who and what Surterra is. I'm James Whitcomb. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of the company. I'm also on the board, and I help Bo Wrigley, my boss, run the company on a day-to-day basis. Bo first invested in our company in September 2017 and led our most recent financing round and became chairman and CEO after that financing round. And He's frankly the best thing that ever happened to us. He's got deep, deep experience building not only brands, but portfolios of brands that interact with each other through his time as chairman and CEO of the William Wrigley Company, the famous gum brand that he sold kind of at the peak of the financial crisis. So we founded the company in 2014, and it was originally just kind of a think tank of a couple folks that were pursuing licenses across the Southeast. And we were from Atlanta, where we're still headquartered today, and we never thought we would kind of walk into Florida and win one of the first original 5, what are now called super licenses in Florida. But we got one, and then we started standing up the business in 2016, kind of operationally, right after we won the license in December 2015. And from there, that's when the fun really began, and that's kind of when I joined as well. So just quickly covering our first slide, just a little bit of an overview. There are 14 licenses now. There are really only 5 of us that have any kind of operation or really revenue. That will completely change. There is a lot of competition coming. There are a lot of people with really big balance sheets coming into the state that will do very, very well. So as I said, we were one of the original, we were one of the original 5 super licenses, and we've kind of come a long way since then. We also have one of 3 licenses in Texas. Both of these are vertically integrated, obviously. And we bought an asset in Las Vegas, which is a market that I think is probably the most important in the US going forward for the next year or so. And as of Monday, we announced our acquisition of Netta, New England Treatment Access, which is Massachusetts' largest operator. And based on all the information that I have across private and public companies, I think has the highest projected 2019 EBITDA of anyone on the planet. So with all that said, we're really focused on our partnership with Margaritaville. That's something that we signed a few months ago and something that we're launching in April of this year in California and Florida. So that's Jimmy Buffett's brand. And we think that's a brand that has the capability to be one of cannabis's first billion-dollar brands in 5 or 6 years, and I'll circle back on that. Next bullet point, we actually closed that transaction, and then, as I already said, we closed Las Vegas. So we're really in 4 states, but we'll be entering California as a 5th state through the Coral Reefer kind of partnership there. I won't really talk about the importance of Florida. I think everybody here kind of already knows how big Florida is and how big that it will be, but I will stress, while we're currently number 2 in Florida behind Trulieve, which is a great operator and is doing a great job, there is a lot more competition coming, and there will be a lot more pressure on Kim and her team and really some of the other folks going forward, and on us, frankly, too. So we've got 18 stores today. We'll have 21 by the end of this month, and we'll have 31 by the end of Q1. And I think we'll probably land at somewhere around 50 by the end of 2019. We really want to shift more of our thinking and our focus towards a delivery infrastructure and platform, which I think the Florida market will like a little bit better. And there's kind of diminishing returns after you get past a certain point as far as store count. It's really critical for us and for all Florida operators to stay pedal to the metal as far as retail rollouts before this legislative session is over on May 3rd, because there's a lot that could change during that legislative session. The vertically integrated framework was essentially thrown out with the Florida grown case, as many of you may know or may not know. The Florida model as we know it today may completely cease to exist in 3 or 4 months. That's something that I don't think is getting talked about nearly enough. And let's just say that our entire management team is focused pretty much solely at this point on making sure we get this coming session right to get what we want in the rules. Okay, let's see what else we have here. A little bit about us. I think I've already covered this. I do want to stress kind of our team's focus on government relations since 2014. That's really been our core competency. We're really first and foremost a government affairs firm, and we also happen to want to create a great cannabis brand. Sorry. A little bit about our facilities in Florida. We started off with a tiny indoor grow in Tallahassee we actually built it in late 2015 before we won the license to just show the state that we had something to go to market with really quickly. We now have a 300,000 square foot facility outside of Tampa. We're putting about an additional $50 million worth of CapEx into that facility this year alone. One of the themes I'll come back and touch on is the fact that Florida is woefully underprepared for how much demand is coming online. Not even we are fully prepared for how much demand is coming online. I'll be very upfront about that. I think Florida needs 10 million square feet of grow to meet demand by 2022, 2023. At new build CapEx of $250 a foot, that's a ton of money that needs to be pumped into the state, and people just aren't really connecting with how much that is and how much is needed. I predict that if you fly over the state in a plane in the year 2025, you will notice a physical difference in the way that the landscape looks, in the same way that the citrus industry in Florida caused the state to be carved up by these irrigation canals. That will happen for cannabis in Florida. Utility companies are already trying to plan for increased power demand. So that's coming. And I think it'll be big, and that's before we even get into talking about hemp production, right? Which hopefully under Nikki Fried's reign going forward will replace citrus as a cash crop. This is what our stores look like. Again, 18 now, and we'll get up to about 50 this year. This is the concept we'll use pretty much everywhere. One of the things that keeps me up most at night as kind of a principal in the company is how to keep your retail concept relevant and cool. Adam Bierman at MedMen, I don't always see eye to eye with him, but he's done a really good job at several things. But what he's done the best job of, in my opinion, is becoming a really cool retailer. Right? He talks about being cool in LA, being cool in New York, cities that matter where thought leaders and influencers exist. That's really critical as I think this industry gets away from all this talk about production, scale, and capacity, and it becomes about who has the broadest product selection and who's the best retailer. Everybody knows that brands will win, right? A couple of our brands here. So we have the Surterra Wellness brand, and we have the Florida's Finest brand. We also have Coral Reefer, as I mentioned, which is the brand that we're doing in partnership with Margaritaville. Obviously, on the left, more medical leaning. Again, how do we have mass appeal without feeling too clinical? On the right, there's a brand narrative here that has to do with strains that originally grew well in the swamps of Florida and kind of bringing that back into the modern lore. This is the last thing I'll talk about, just sort of our footprint. Again, I really don't like these slides in presentations because everybody just wants to put a flag on the map. I guess the third column from the right that has all the blanks in it, that's Massachusetts. That's the acquisition we just announced. So, you know, we cover a lot of Americans now. The big thing is, can we execute on our coral reefer kind of Margaritaville joint venture in California? That remains to be seen. So maybe now talking a little bit more about what we're doing now and what keeps me up at night. The coral reefer brand. We've got some pretty aggressive assumptions there for how big that could be. You know, is there room in 5 years for $3 or $4 billion brands in cannabis? If that's the case, you know, do we have the management team to get it there? That's one of the major things that keeps us up at night. And also, how do you take a brand that's essentially a baby boomer brand, right, like Margaritaville is? It's actually shocking how many different industries they're in. They have, I think, the #1 brand of frozen shrimp, all the way through to, you know, senior living facilities and resorts. Obviously, they're in the gaming industry, which has its own regulatory implications, especially in Las Vegas, Louisiana, and Atlantic City. You know, they may need to divest that potentially in order to work with us. And how do you take that brand and transcend out of the baby boomer generation and make it cool for the 18 to or 21 to 35-year-olds? That's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about. Pricing pressure, right? How do we maintain sort of our premium quality and get a premium sort of heavy, good feeling piece of vape hardware in there for less than $100? How do you underprice dosist, right, with an effects-driven brand, an effects-driven approach, and still come in under their sort of $9,500 price